northeast and Xinjiang, and permitted them to set up the Far East Intelligence Bureau in China. If war broke out in Europe, the CCP would send an expeditionary army of 100,000 plus 2 million laborers to support the Soviet Union. In addition, the CCP promised to merge some special regions in Liaoning province into North Korea, if necessary. The resources and capital the CCP used in the Civil War were accumulated by not putting up resistance against the Japanese, as well as by selling out China's national rights and interests. Its coming to power was also at the expense of countless civilian lives. The CCP is well known for its huge crowd strategy. They sent thousands of unarmed civilians to the front lines, forcing the KMT to either murder them or give up. They called it using a sea of people in the war of the people. When besieging the city of Changchun in 1948, in order to exhaust the food supply in the city, the People's Liberation Army was ordered to forbid the people from leaving the city. As a result, during the 2 months of siege, nearly 200,000 died of hunger or froze to death in the city. After the battle was over, the CCP, without a tinge of shame, proudly proclaimed that they had liberated Changchun without firing a single shot. Using ways like this, the CCP used harsh violence and deception, sinister and ruthless methods, successfully chased the KMT away from the mainland. The Communist Manifesto relates the Communist Party's historical and philosophical basis to class conflict and struggle. The proletariat broke free from traditional morals and social relations for the sake of seizing power. Communist philosophy promotes fighting. Struggle relies on hatred. Where hatred does not exist, it can be incited and created. Incitement and fighting are the 6th and 7th inherited traits of the CCP. A well-known story of class oppression, The White-Haired Girl, was originally a story about a woman immortal. It had nothing to do with class conflicts. But under the pens of the military writers, she became a person who was being persecuted with enormous hatred. They created a landlord to bully the white-haired girl and transformed a classic folktale into a propaganda piece promoting class struggle. The story was then transformed into a modern drama, opera, and ballet. Inciting the masses to struggle against each other is a classic trick of the CCP. That is where the formula for class division comes from, making 95% of the population struggle against the remaining 5%. The CCP has made full use of and developed this technique in many of its political movements. People classified into the 95% were safe, but those within the 5% were enemies and were struggled against. Out of fear and to protect themselves, most people strived to be included in the 95%. This resulted, though, in many cases in which people brought harm to others, even adding insult to injury. Fighting, to the CCP, is more than the armed forces and armed struggle. Mao Zedong said, "A revolution is not a dinner party, or writing an essay, or painting a picture, or doing embroidery. A revolution is an insurrection, an act of violence by which one class overthrows another." We need to struggle to seize power, and we also need struggle during periods of peace. In 1941, the CCP began the so-called rectification movement in Yan'an. It created a model for persecution that is most fearsome. The first step of the rectification was to set up individual personnel archives. One had to list all acquaintances since birth, all important events, and the times and places of their occurrence. Emphasis was placed on personal thought processes during these social activities. Evaluation based on party nature was even more important, and one had to confess any anti-party thoughts or behavior in one's consciousness, speech, work attitudes, everyday life, or social activities. In fact, the rectification movement was a so-called cleansing movement by which Mao Zedong intended to purge and eliminate party dissidents. The CCP used methods of testing everyone. It extorted so-called confessions through torture, resulting in countless frame-ups, false, and wrong accusations. During the rectification, Yan'an was called a place for purging human nature. According to the Guangdong District County statistics, the number of types of corporal punishment they used was around 24. The rectification movement was the most horrendous, darkest, and most ferocious power game ever played out in the human world. It blasphemed human civilization and dignity. It distorted human nature and conscience. Under anxiety and fear, people abandoned honor and self-respect. Under intimidation and torture, people betrayed their conscience and friendship. According to a report in the CCP-controlled Liberation Daily newspaper, in Shuishe County, 160 people were said to have repented, more than 280 were said to have confessed, and 190 people were exposed. Even teenage children went up to the stage and confessed that they were spies. In order to protect one's own life, the people stopped expressing their own opinions and began to simply recite quotations from party leaders instead. The rectification movement in Yan'an has since become the template for CCP's political movements. Since its early stages, the CCP has continuously built up its comprehensive theoretical system of genocide. It is composed of the CCP's series on class, revolution, struggle, violence, dictatorship, political movements, political parties, and more. Elimination is the CCP's eighth inherited trait. The CCP has also done other things with absolute cruelty, similar to the rectification movement in Yan'an. It deprived landlords and capitalists of their property, exterminated the landlord and rich peasant classes, destroyed rank and order in the countryside, kidnapped and extorted the wealthier people, brainwashed war prisoners, and even claimed to reform industrialists and capitalists. It infiltrated and disintegrated the KMT, and it split from the Communist International and betrayed it. It has even threatened its own members with coercion. Everything the CCP did was hard line. Everything mentioned above was based on the CCP theory of genocide. The essential expression of the CCP genocide is the extermination of conscience and independent thought. If Hitler was said to have exterminated the flesh body of human beings, then the CCP not only wants to exterminate the flesh body, but even more so, wants to exterminate the human mind and spirit. Each and every political movement has been to reform the people's mind and brainwash the human spirit.